from the Silicon Valley Media office in Boston, Massachusetts, it's theCUBE. Now, here are your hosts, Stu Miniman and Dave Vellante.
Hi everybody, this is Dave Vellante with Stu Miniman. We're here at the East Coast offices of SiliconANGLE Media. This is theCUBE. We got a special conversation that Stu and I are going to have. Stu, it's been a big week. You had the EMC acquisition by Dell actually went through officially, and HPE did another spin merge. Seems like a popular technique that Meg Whitman and company are using.
Dave, I thought we're here to talk about the iPhone 7.
Oh, no, CNBC's got that covered.
Okay, absolutely.
Continuous coverage of iPhone 7.
Non-stop Apple all the time, absolutely.
Yet another phone for $1,200, but we digress. So yeah, so big week, Stu, and we are entering a new era of enterprise technology. I mean, let's start with the Dell acquisition of EMC. It felt like it took a long time, but actually didn't really feel like it took a long time, if you know what I mean. It was many, many months. It was Columbus Day last year that they announced it. Huge acquisition, so it's not surprising that it took many, many months, but it happened. It's pretty much on schedule. China delayed things a little bit. We'll talk about that, but what do you think? New era.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, I remember when we heard the rumor first, I was actually at Amazon reInvent, so kind of ironic that we were at the Amazon show when we heard it. John Furrier was like, no way, and we were like, well, maybe, and John said absolutely. He, sees where everything's gone now, and less than a year, just as they said, a lot of hurdles they had to go through. I mean, huge financial. I mean, Dave, the industry's looked at this. I know you've dug into it. We've had conversations with Michael Dell and many people. Just a deal of this size has so many pieces. When we did Dell World, I said the problem is people are trying to figure out the chess moves, and Dell's not showing you their board. So, SecureWorks is IPO'd, things that they're selling off, the services piece. There were, many major pieces that moved to be able to make that financial stuff go into action. I got a good education on tranching, how they were doing all the bonds and everything like that, and the geopolitical politics that goes into this. The U.S. need to approve it, European Union need to approve it, and then China was the last one that needed to approve it, and the stockholders. So many pieces to make this historical event happen, and kudos to that team, because it seemed to go mostly as planned. No major roadblocks. It's not like they had to make any major changes on the deal, or no white knight came in and said, oh, we need an extra $1 billion or $2 billion to come in there. They moved it along.
Well, so to your point, it is a historic deal, and the fascinating thing to me, Stu, is like the brilliance of Michael Dell. He and his partners at Silver Lake, they put up only $4 billion. Now, Michael's a multi-billionaire. Silver Lake obviously has resources, but they only had to put up $4 billion of their own cash to get what is now a $74 billion company, according to the 8K that Dell filed yesterday. The notes of that $74 billion, by the way, say that's the unaudited figure as of January of 2016, but still, $70+ billion company, $4 billion in cash, for a multi-billionaire. So how'd they do it? Well, they did it with a lot of really interesting, as you say, moving parts. The tracking stock, raising some debt, delevering in the process. Ray Wang had a comment in the post that those guys wrote that he was concerned about, for EMC customers spinning off all these assets. I'm not as concerned. I mean, the core of EMC is intact, but the organization now is interesting. So Michael Dell didn't waste any time. They filed many board actions yesterday with the SEC. They are immediately officially Dell Technologies Inc. EMC emails have already changed, right? So they're ready for this. So, but organizationally, it's quite interesting what's going on here with David Goulden in charge of enterprise. Talk about the organization a bit.
Yeah, so Dave, as you said, they moved really fast on some of these things. I live in Hopkinton. I worked on South Street for 10 years, and there's already Dell EMC signs up. As a friend of mine inside EMC said, well, we had a year to plan this, and a long holiday weekend to roll it out. So new signs, new mulch. and David Goulden's in charge. So, so many people are like, oh, they're selling off EMC or doing this. It's like, no, that's not Michael's plan. He, at VMworld, when we interviewed him, John Furrier and I interviewed him, he said, first of all, VMware, I'm not selling it. It's crown jewel, absolutely huge part of what we're doing. From a Dell's EMC standpoint, Dell EMC is the corporate brand. That's what they're selling to enterprise users. And not only is it all the assets that EMC had, but the traditional Dell server and networking group. So, Ashley, who runs the server group, Tom Burns, who runs the networking group, they report to David Goulden. So it's interesting, as we've looked at this, there's parts of it that says, wait, who's acquiring who? The whole enterprise brand, which is, a big piece of this, is David Goulden. David's been running the EMC, II, part of the business under Joe Tucci for the last few years. He was kind of the, heavily involved in the whole federation piece. You've known Dave Goulden for a while. He's been doing a great job with it, and now he has a big piece of Dell Technologies. Marius Haas gets the commercial side of things. Jeremy Burton's the CMO over the whole Dell Technologies, and most of the senior leadership people are still in place, and of course there's already rumors of what was it, another 2,000 or 3,000 people are going to be laid off out of 140,000 people altogether. So there's some things moving around and changing, but they all have the Dell email addresses. I hear they can all communicate internally via Skype, and there isn't a lot of uncertainty internally as to who's running what and where things are going.
Well, everything enterprise, my understanding, is Dell branded Dell EMC. Billy Scannell will be repping Dell Client Technologies. Everything consumer and client is going to be branded Dell.
Right.
And that's sort of the split. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff, in between the federation pieces, RSA and Pivotal. They still sort of exist as divisions. Pivotal obviously going to be spun off at some point, presumably anyway, to do an IPO, and we'll talk about that perhaps in a bit. I want to come back to the deal. I want to talk briefly about, well, let's talk about competition first of all, because you can't talk about Dell EMC without talking about HPE. More news this week. HPE did a spin merge of its software asset, basically to a company called Micro Focus, which is a Golden Gate Capital roll-up of a bunch of different software companies. HP shareholders will hold 50.1% of the company, but HPE will not own that. So it's sort of one of those interesting, probably highly tax-efficient deals. But HP is getting $2.5 billion in cash, and then a 50.1% shareholders, a 50.1% ownership in this entity. Just sort of rough math, rough arithmetic, HP probably paid about $20 billion for all those software assets comprising Autonomy and Vertica and Mercury Interactive and ArcSight and et cetera. 20 billion down to 2.5 billion in cash, not a good return. HP software business has not been growing. I've been saying for years they've got to, get their act together in software. Looks like they just gave up. So, the question I have for you, Stu, is HPE now focused on infrastructure? Is that, notwithstanding Amazon, is that the main arms dealer competitor to Dell EMC, Dell Technologies?
Yeah, I think absolutely it is, Dave. I mean, Meg Whitman was on the financial shows this morning talking about how she believes that they HPE are more agile and focused and have a better solution stack than Dell and Dell EMC do together. Michael Dell and the whole Dell EMC team, of course, have their sights set on crushing HPE, as they've said. They think they've got the best solution. So we've been watching, how many decades now, Dell and HP going after each other, with server as the core and the foundational layer for everything that goes on top of it. So it's going to be interesting to watch. Dave, just a quick question for you, because we've been getting this education. We've got the tracking stock on the VMware piece. This is the second spin merge that HP's done. They had the CSC services. Why did they do this as a spin merge? What is that? Why does that make sense?
I think they do it because it's a tax neutral move. And they maintain ownership in these entities that they spin into. So as a result, they get the benefit of long-term growth or whatever value can be created there, and they don't get taxed on it. And they get the further benefit of taking these non-core assets and getting rid of them. You know, HP, this is the dismantling of a Silicon Valley icon. I mean, and it started when Carly Fiorina wanted to buy PwC. And she wasn't able to get that deal. IBM ultimately ended up buying PwC. It was a transformative move for IBM at a much, much lower price than Carly was willing to pay. But Carly wanted to go, do a big acquisition. She ended up with Compaq. Now Compaq was okay, but it was very controversial. Members of the board, from the Packard or Hewlett family, I can't remember now, were fighting it tooth and nail. And that set in motion a whole new series of mega acquisitions, including EDS, which Hurd orchestrated, which was pretty, not a great acquisition. It was a boat anchor acquisition for HP. Hurd thought that they could replace all these IBM mainframes with HP servers, and when that ended up happening, is IBM sucked up back all the business that was up for renewal. So that didn't work. And so now you're seeing Meg having to come in and clean up that mess. We didn't even talk about autonomy, I won't even go there, but Meg's just getting rid of all these assets that weren't performing, and the way they're doing it is to get some cash, helps clean up the balance sheet, and do these spin merges, which gives them ownership in these new entities. They still own a part of the CSC entity. They own a big chunk, obviously, of this Micro Focus entity. So they're very, very tax efficient. Now you're left with an infrastructure company, so they've gotten rid of non-core assets, security, non-core, which surprised me. I mean, I'm not surprised because they had to get rid of security to get the price that they wanted, the $8.8 billion of value, but it's only $2.5 billion of cash only. So now that we're left with a pure play infrastructure company, I've been saying for years, we've been talking about on theCUBE, you and I and John Furrier, HP's got to shrink in order to grow. Well, it's shrunk. Question is, can it now grow, and how?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dave. I mean, we've looked at, and we were talking at VMworld, Pat Gelsinger laid out how public cloud is just eating a big part of the market. His numbers reached kind of the majority in 5 years. I think we can all argue as to what percentage in what year, but reasonable people understand that public cloud is growing, and that is a threat. If you say Dell and HPE, at its core, if they're selling less servers, that's a challenge to their overall business. At its core, that's what they need to do, and the addressable market that they have going forward seems to be shrinking over time. So how do you keep growing if your core business is shrinking?
So there's been a 10-year, we talk about this a lot, a 10-year slow motion collapse in infrastructure hardware and software pricing. And it's due to open source software and cloud. So we've seen the difficulties that companies are having, even these open source companies, look at Cloudera, look at Hortonworks, and others, of really driving new market growth. Now Cloudera is private, and they've got a big chunk of cash from Intel, so it's hard to tell exactly what's going on there, but they're not setting the world on fire to the point that we thought they would, from let's say 5 years ago. And Hortonworks is a public company. We see the financials there. So the open source software business has always been very hard. Red Hat's really the only, exception to the rule of it's, why buy the cow when the milk is free? But so when you look at the effects of that with Amazon and open source software in particular on the infrastructure business, something had to give. So we now are entering this new era of enterprise tech, where you've got Amazon as the low-cost, high-margin provider, and you've got Dell with EMC now, and HP as the arms dealers to the cloud, without a public cloud, ownership of a public cloud strategy, other than, I guess, VirtuStream and vCloud Air, Redux 3. We'll talk about that in a second. So you've got this clash of a former Titan in HPE, with a slimmed down former Titan. You got the new Titan now, Dell Technologies, and then you got Amazon kicking ass as we know. How do we see, you guys at Wikibon, us at Wikibon, how do we see this shaking out over the next 5 to 10 years?
So it's an interesting challenge, Dave, because I believe if I look at the Dell EMC and that whole Dell Technologies, they've got pretty clear how they're going to sell to the hyperscale guys. Partnership with Microsoft really important. How they interact with Amazon is kind of shaping out. VMware had an announcement with IBM and what they're doing with SoftLayer. Don't put them quite in the same category as Amazon and Microsoft, but trying to figure out that whole second tier of service providers. And IBM, of course, has some large cloud revenue. But you've got the hyperscales, you've got your traditional data center, and what that balance and that shift over the next couple of years is going to be really interesting to watch. So, I'm comfortable with the strategy that Dell Technologies has. As a matter of fact, Lenovo has a very similar strategy to kind of come up. They've got strong presence in Asia, and don't have as much of a legacy to try to hold on to. So they can cut costs on the one hand and push into some new markets. HPE, I don't feel that they've kind of cut. They've started to cut down, but they don't have as clear of a strategy as to how they go to adopt in the new hyperscale space, how they defend their existing environments, and manage that transition.
Another wild card is China. Nobody's talking about the effects of China. Huawei in particular, Lenovo as well, and it's no coincidence in my view that China slowed this deal down. When we talk to executives about it, they say, hey, we got the deal done on time. Okay, I get that. That's not the angle, in my view anyway. China wants to be self-sufficient. It's going to have, by the end of the decade, it's got its own microprocessors, it's got its own Linux operating system. It claims, I don't know, some large number of the world's top 10 supercomputers. So China wants to be self-sufficient as a technology powerhouse. So my view is that China was demanding concessions of Dell, and they probably got them. I'm sure they got them. We don't know what they are. But likely they were designed to slow Dell Technologies down. And so we don't hear much about China. Huawei's we got restrictions in terms of selling to the US government, for example, which is a huge component of the business. But everybody's eyeing China because it's such a huge market. What's your take on all this?
I mean, Dave, in my network, the work that China has done on, say, the latest processors has my network buzzing. So specifically, the US government told Intel, don't ship the next generation of chips there because we're worried about, both competitive and secrecy and everything like that. And China said, fine, we'll create our own microprocessors. The fastest supercomputer in the world right now is made with China chips. And I think it's like 4 out of the top 10 or 20 are Chinese-made devices there. So we know, China and the ODMs in Taiwan have been taking chunks out of the server market. Seeing some of these options with the chips there. Huawei, from a networking standpoint, the joke I had is that John Chambers in his last couple of years, he had 2 things he was trying to do. Number one is he was doing with the U.S. government. Number one is he was trying to be able to repatriate all of his foreign money, and number 2, he was trying to keep China out of the U.S. and our partners' markets. And they did a better job on keeping China out than they did at repatriating the money. But China is definitely a threat to the networking business, and it only makes sense that storage is kind of the third leg of that stool for infrastructure. China has a huge internal market, and they try to capture that. And as well as they want to supply the rest of the world. So, Huawei's a huge player. There's a number of other players, and the government definitely has, interest in controlling that market and keeping out what would be the largest player in the space, which is Dell plus EMC.
Strong local demand and strong local competition are 2 ingredients to global powerhouses, and so China's obviously one to watch and a wild card. Amazon, I think people are beginning to understand, even though there's more to come. We maybe talk about that some, but China's sort of interesting. I want to come back to HPE. What does HPE need to do now? Does HPE need to make another acquisition? Does it need to buy a Nutanix and acquire them, or does it need to do some tuck-ins on an Eguaz or a Datrium, one of these sort of new wave hyperscale types of companies? What does HPE need to do, or does it just need to keep going along and investing in Helion?
Yeah, right, what wave is HPE going to ride? So, virtualization, the server division did real well, driving VMware. They were a great OEM, they did a lot there. The storage division's done pretty well, especially with the 3PAR acquisition. But, is containers the next wave? Is IoT a big wave? We see Hitachi Data Systems, big focus on IoT with what they're doing there, huge impact on infrastructure, and that could be player. I know you've talked with HPE plenty about that. that. Analytics was one that seemed to make a lot of sense, but now, maybe that's non-core as to how they push that. So, obviously they have to have, I think the line was, HPE's not getting out of software, they're just, getting out of the non-core piece.
Please.
So,
I've
was,
seen that line,
it definitely
HP gave up on software.
It definitely worried me a little bit because, I need that, right, security, analytics, IoT, you got to be in at least a couple of those right now. Otherwise, what's going to drive your infrastructure going forward because of the big waves that are driving, all the connectivity, all the storage, all the devices.
I mean, I'm saying HP gave up on software because we're talking about a software business that is non-recurring engineering costs that you drive marginal economics versus one that's tied to somebody's infrastructure.
I mean,
and if you're saying, okay, well, our software is going to run on standard commodity servers, but we're going to be able to get the kind of margins that we have historically out of our infrastructure software, our SDN and our SDDC, that's going to be a big challenge. That's why the Dell EMC deal to me was inevitable. Amazon's operating profit is in the mid-20s. EMC's, this is non-GAAP. EMC's lucky if it's in the high teens, right? So they're more profitable and ostensibly less expensive. So this trend is not going to go away. Amazon's not just going to disappear. They're going to keep, in my view, keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Yes, hybrid, I get that. Data locality, I get that. But these are winner takes all markets, generally speaking. Does that change? I mean, is it obviously big market? There's room for everybody, and these guys aren't going to just roll over and say, okay, Amazon, take me to the cleaners. But Amazon is cleaning up, and Azure is in a good position. Google, we can debate. They're trying to get back in the game with Diane Green at the helm. It's kind of interesting there, but the volumes and the efficiency that those three companies are driving, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, compared to what the enterprise guys can do, it's scary. So that as a result, you've got to have lower costs, hence the cost restructuring, the delevering going on at Dell, and then again you got China. So how's it all shake out, Stu? Does HPE in particular have to make a big move?
So, what they don't have that Dell Technologies has is the rest of that, what used to be the Federation, Dave. So, Dell Technologies, it's got VMware, it's got Pivotal, it's got a few paths as to where it's going in the future, and I don't see that in HPE. So,
but maybe that's a good thing. VMware's legacy, you've been saying that. You guys talked about that.
Yeah, VMware might be the new legacy. That might be the new legacy, but it still has, it's still dominant in its market share there. It does not have the applications, but it still pulls you up the stack a little bit beyond just the infrastructure, which is still, if the hypervisor's commoditized, isn't everything underneath it even more commoditized?
It's got obviously a big customer base, but didn't VMware capitulate when it basically said, okay, we're going to do this, what John Furrier calls interclouding? I know you don't like that term, but basically we're going to be the manager of the clouds, right? As opposed to we're going to dominate the cloud market. They tried to dominate the cloud market. They failed. They've tried now a couple of times. We haven't talked much about IBM. Actually, let's park that for a second. we kind of don't have much time, right? But so, is that interclouding, what I'm calling the interclouding strategy, going to allow companies to maintain their relevance?
Yeah, or
are they traffic cops?
And HPE has gone that. There's management that they can do there. They tie into, especially, HPE is going to say, we're as good as of a partner with Microsoft as Dell is. They're both, big importance there, and they're going to tie into the big public clouds. I've seen HP go through even more churn on their cloud than we have kind of the VMware and the EMC standpoint. EMC kind of understands where they sit on the infrastructure. They've still been growing kind of their converged and pushing hard into the hyper-converged marketplace. HPE has developed a bunch internally. Might they make an acquisition? There's been plenty of rumors. You mentioned Nutanix. A year ago there was a rumor they were going to buy SimpliVity, but they didn't pull the trigger on it. There's a number of things. I mean, Dave, we could be sitting here today saying that HP finally finished the acquisition of EMC if Meg had pulled the trigger, 2 years ago, like we had heard.
That fire.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Other things that we're seeing, we just put out a server SAN report, basically saying the traditional block and file SAN and NAS business is peaked, and it's going to decline over the next 10 years. I mean, when it first came out, we got some blowback on that. I think there are a lot of people who now kind of agree with that. You're seeing the spending patterns.
Yeah, so this third year we've done this research, Dave, and every year it's, I'm not sure, I don't like some of your charts, and they dig into the data and they're like, oh, and this looks good, and maybe a year or two out looks okay, but forget it. 3 years from now, you guys are way too aggressive. Well, it's the third year that everybody mostly agrees with what we put out this year, so we think we've been pretty accurate on the trend as to where it's going.
And you got IoT pushing at the edge, pun intended. You've got virtual reality now, and you got companies like NVIDIA, with calling into question the ability of traditional microprocessors to keep up. Certainly the big data, while there aren't a ton of vendors making money, a lot of practitioners are doing really well in big data. So that's a huge trend. The mobile wave has hit. So you have all these disruptions. Wither the traditional enterprise business. I mean, we've got a whole new era here where you've got Amazon and Microsoft, dominating. Microsoft leveraging its estate, Amazon with the new disruptive business model, and now you've got basically HPE and Dell duking it out for arms dealer leadership. Yeah. Is there growth potential there?
So, I mean, Dave, how many years have we been saying that, users that want to get control of what they're doing need to get out of that undifferentiated heavy lifting and be able to add more value back to the business. It's been many years we've been saying that, and we're starting to see significant shifts into how IT does things, and that means they're not managing that infrastructure as much. They purchase it. It is more shrink wrapped. It is more automated, and they're not worried as much about some of the bits and bytes inside. Of course, you still need to have your domain expertise. You need to make sure you understand how your applications work in your environment and where you have competitive differentiation. And we still see people striving hard to hold on to anything that they've got that differentiates them, even if they're using things like Amazon. But it does make a shift as to where that conversation's happening, where the budget flows, and the relationships that they're having with, tends to be a smaller number of technology partners.
And we haven't talked about Oracle and IBM, and we don't have enough time, but those guys, to me anyway, Stu, are largely software companies. They're IBM with its analytics push and its cognitive push. Oracle, obviously, database and its SaaS business. That's what's driving their business, not infrastructure. Infrastructure is something that they're doing to try to drive down cost. In IBM's case, keep the mainframe. It's very profitable, but IBM's future is in software, in artificial intelligence, or what they call cognitive. Oracle's future is in SaaS. Those are different businesses than what Dell and HPE, what's left of HPE now, are in. So that's sort of outside this little core infrastructure discussion that we're having. I'll give you a final thought, Stu. Say it's been a big week, although no huge surprises. These were both expected in the case of Dell EMC and a poorly kept secret in the case of HP. It's been known for months now that they're going to be doing this. So.
Yep, the death of the headphone jack. Oh wait, we're still not talking about Apple, sorry. But I was having a conversation online and we're talking about, Dave, you remember the four horsemen of the internet era. It was, Sun, Oracle, Cisco, and EMC. And Sun's gone, EMC, it's now Dell EMC. The two's gone. Their names after Michael Dell's up on all the buildings on their business cards, and they've got Dell email addresses. And the four horsemen of the internet era. It's Apple, Facebook, Google, and Amazon.
Facebook, Apple, Google, and Netflix.
Yeah.
Right. A practitioner changing business, and maybe throw Uber and Airbnb in there.
Amazon's there. So
and Amazon as well. Yes. Oh, I said Apple. Yeah. Right.
No, but I thought it's Apple and Amazon.
FANG, Facebook, Apple, Google, and Netflix, and throw Amazon in there too. Maybe it's FANG. Okay. So. All right, Stu, there's been some good pieces. Gil Press wrote a great piece on the short history of EMC.
Yeah, Dave, come on. You've known EMC since they were getting beyond mainframe and going to storage. What's this mean to you of kind of...
Well, a lot of people are nostalgically looking back at EMC. I say it, EMC's gone. Digital equipment is gone. Digital equipment was bigger in its day than EMC. Sun was pretty big in its day. Those companies are gone. They're not relevant anymore. Nobody's talking about them. This is Dell Technologies. EMC, as we know it, is gone. The Federation failed. It was a great try. I have great respect for EMC and have a historical perspective as well. But to me, it's all about looking forward. And this is a new era. And the days of the storage model that EMC invented, both started the mainframe and then moved into so-called open systems and drove 60% plus gross margins and tons of cash flow for years and years and years, are done. It's interesting to look back, but frankly, I'm more interested in looking forward and talking about how customers should be placing their bets. And customers are placing their bets, and they're hedging those bets. And in some respects, Stu, I think it's somewhat easier when the industry is consolidated like this. I think Amazon's a pretty safe bet for the right use cases, even though a lot of people in the enterprise want to scare you. And I think that Dell Technologies is a pretty safe bet. I think HPE is a very customer-focused company, and if you're an HPE customer, you're going to be okay, sticking with those guys. And obviously, Microsoft and Cisco and some of the other big members of the cartel. Now, where it gets tricky is, okay, what about Google? What about these other clouds that are emerging? Where should I use those? So, complexity is still there. And then what about innovation? Where's that come from? And it's still coming from the Valley. Maybe that's why people are ignoring China. But what EMC means to me is another East Coast mini computer company. I mean, essentially, that's what they were. They were the progeny of East Coast mini computer companies, failed to survive. And as an East Coast person, that's too bad. Maybe IoT will change that, but Silicon Valley remains the center of innovation in our industry. And that's why I'm happy that we have a bi-coastal company. All right, Stu, again, I'll give you a last word.
All right, so yeah, I mean, Dave, we've been saying for years that storage is looking more and more like servers. Well, the biggest storage company is now working for a server company. So, it might be the death of the EMC Federation, but, I know the people on South Street are going to say, long live Dell Technologies and Dell EMC.
Yeah, that's what they should say. So, and we're excited to have theCUBE bringing you all these trends. We cover the enterprise tech. theCUBE is the worldwide leader in enterprise tech coverage and live tech coverage as well. So really appreciate your feedback and your participation as a community. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stu and I will be back at Edge, IBM Edge, and we're at
Dell EMC World,
and we'll be at Dell EMC World.
And Amazon reInvent.
And numerous shows this fall, so look for theCUBE. Check out the @theCUBE handle. Go to siliconangle.tv for all the upcoming shows. Go to siliconangle.com for all the news, and of course, wikibon.com for all the research. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.